Just a quick reminder that you need to pick your piece up and move it every once in a while to make sure that it doesn't get stuck to your felting surface. Here's my design that I'm going to make for my flat felted piece. And what you need to figure out is what colors you want to use and what shapes that you're going to need to cut out. I could cut just the shape of the gem that is showing, but what I like to do is actually extend that piece when I'm making my pattern pieces a little bit longer, so that way whatever is in front of it will actually overlap that object. The reason for this is if I just cut the shapes that I need and don't have extra for overlap, sometimes those pieces will spread apart a little bit and you'll see the background in between those two pieces. So here's my pattern piece that I've already traced, and I have the extra that will hang underneath the skull a little bit further. Here I've also shown where the top part of the skull is going to overlap the jaw. And again, this really just gives you wiggle room to play and adjust the pieces, and also makes sure that you don't have that background showing through if you accidentally put a piece not perfectly where it needs to go. And once you have all of these pieces traced using a light table or something like that, you can then kind of play around and adjust and move them now, or you could also do that once everything is cut out from felt and on the background. Once you have all of your pieces ready to trace onto the felt, I suggest flipping them over to the back side to trace that reversed shape. What this is going to do is make it so that way your Sharpie marks are going to be on the back of the piece where it won't show. And when you go to turn it the other clean side, that'll be the right side. And this is especially important whenever you're working with very light colors. I like to begin by having all of my pieces placed on my background, and then I remove the top once everything is in place and begin felting the items in the very back. If you realize that something isn't quite placed where you need it, as long as you haven't felted too much, you can actually peel the piece back up, move it, and then keep felting in a new position. Once that piece is pretty well felted to the background, I cut out my other shapes for the facets of these gems and begin to felt those down. It's a combination of flat felt and roving that I am here guiding very carefully into exactly the shape that I need. I also used very thin pieces of gray roving to accentuate the edges of the facets, and then other roving colors blended together to give a little bit of shimmer. Once the gems were all done, I placed my full skull again, then removed the top and added shading and details to the back of the skull and the lower jaw. When you're shading and adding detail with roving, you want to make sure that if you need a very strong line, that you're using the single needle to very purposefully place that fiber. And if you want more of a soft gradient, that the fibers need to be a little more spread out. For the smoke, I'm using very small, thin wisps of white to give that translucent, smoky effect, and I am being very careful and purposeful in placing them in curves and twists to help guide the eye around my piece. The more I felt these fibers down, the more they'll blend into my background, so some of them I only want to felt a little bit so that there's those strong lines. I wanted the top of the skull to have a little bit of extra dimension, so I felted along the bottom before stuffing a little bit of extra roving in to have that pop out a little more from the surface. And then finally there's the detailing and shading in the upper part of the skull. Of course, taking the time for this feels like it's going forever and the progress can seem very slow, but really putting in the time and effort to get those details and shading right is always worth it in the end. During the felting process, sometimes your edges can get a little distorted, so you can always go in and clean that up with some scissors. Here's my final piece. I added in some yellow-green to the smoke and also some extra gems because I felt like it was a little empty. And I did some embroidery where the facets of the gems were because that seemed like it needed a little more definition. And you can still see the purple Sharpie around the edge of the white, even though I did it on the back, but it works with my color scheme, so I'm not really mad at it.